Okay, this is Mac, and I'm going to talk about Hussein Obama, Barack Hussein Obama, or Barry Soetoro, or whatever other names he has. This is probably going to be a very, very interesting time, as they say, in the future of the world because of this guy's election now as president. Apparently there's some things about him that are kind of interesting. Apparently he's a Kenyan. According to his grandmother, she was there with him when he was born in Kenya. So he's not a natural born American, which of course the Constitution prohibits people who aren't natural born citizens to become president. So it appears that he was born in Kenya. It also appears that that there's been some shenanigans regarding his birth certificate, so that we can't figure out whether that's true or not. Then the fellow joined, or his mother, who was an atheist, sort of a race mixing gal in the 1960s, who was dating all these different various people. She had him, and she divorced this guy who was evidently his father, who was this polygamist playboy from Kenya. She divorced him and then took old Barack and moved to Indonesia. In Indonesia, he evidently became a citizen because he was adopted by, if he was adopted, apparently he was, by this guy Lolo Soetoro. And Lolo would have made him a Muslim then, because he was put into the school as a Muslim Indonesian citizen, which would also disqualify him from being president, because he was an Indonesian citizen. So he is a Kenyan or he's an Indonesian. If he's an American, we haven't yet got any proof of that. He's a Hamite. That means he's from the sons of Ham. And of course in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, the Bible talks about the three races of mankind. And those that are from Ham, typically all through the Bible, there's problems with that group. And so we're going to have to look at this going forward regarding Babylon and Nimrod and Cain and all kinds of things that are going to be interesting regarding that component. Because the Bible doesn't change. Everything in Genesis from the first 10 chapters is still applicable to this very day. I mean, women still have pain in childbirth. Men still have to live by the sweat of their brow, earning their bread. There's still a curse on the ground. There's still, all these things are still valid to this day. So when we talk about even the idea of the Hamites and the idea of forming a Babylon here on this world, Genesis chapter 11, God wasn't for it back in Genesis chapter 11. He's not going to be for it here in 2008. So we're working against God's plan, and of course we're electing somebody who isn't like 80% of the people in this country. And so problems. And of course that's not politically correct. The politically correct thing is to have all the jumble of people together in the Antichrist building, as he said, brick by brick, calloused hand by calloused hand, building up the Tower of Babylon. That was what he said. He talked about the calloused hands in his acceptance speech. And a Muslim, he talked in one of the interviews, he said, "My Muslim faith," and whether or not that was a slip of the tongue or not, apparently he has or was a Muslim at one point. Went to a Muslim school, very serious Muslim school in Indonesia. And the church that he went to, purportedly a Christian church, the pastor there, a guy named Jeremiah Wright, he would have Sunday sermons with such topics as "Goddamn America" and the U.S. KKKA, things like that. So they were very, that wasn't exactly a Christian church. They welcome in all kinds of people, including plenty of sodomites. It's one of those churches where they welcome in, they're affirming of all the different types of people. So that's the church he went to. And the rumors are also involving him in some of those activities. Rumors. We don't know if they're true, but apparently they are. And the well, apparently they are or they aren't, I don't know. But the other thing about that is that in his acceptance speech, again, he welcomed what he calls the gay Americans and the straight Americans. So he's welcoming the, quote, gay Americans. Of course, that's not what they're called in the Bible. They're not called gay. They're called sodomites. That's the Bible word for them. So anyhow, he's not making those distinctions. He's welcoming everybody. And socialist. In his background, we find that he's buddies with a guy named Bill Ayers, who was a terrorist in the 1960s, radical. And so we have all kinds of fishy things there that are going to probably come out more and more over time. His name, Barak, that was the name of the Muhammad's horse that went up into the third heaven. So Barak, that's interesting. Of course, when he was in Indonesia, one of the interesting things we learned about Lolo, his father, in his book Dreams from My Father, we learn interesting things in that book. One of the things we learned in that book is that old Barry here would take what he said he was going on his road to being a junkie and a pothead because he enjoyed pot, booze, blow, but no smack. So evidently he's done cocaine, but he has standards. You know, he didn't do any smack. I think that means he didn't do any heroin, but he did everything else. And in Dreams of My Father, the other part of it, he talks about how he was introduced to dog meat. And he would eat dog meat and snake meat and grasshoppers there in Indonesia. So we have a guy who has consumed dog. Probably be the first president who has eaten dogs. He's got another Muslim connection in that a cousin of his is evidently a opposition figure in Kenya who's working to impose Sharia law in Kenya. So a lot of crazy things going on there. Now there's a Catholic connection in that he was raised at a Catholic school. And of course we're currently now seeing a sort of détente with the Muslims and the Vatican kind of as occurring as we talk right now. So that will be interesting. We'll have to have some things to look into that. What else? The guy's got family members, brothers living in a slum in Kenya. That's most of his family is dirt poor in Kenya. Some of them are wealthy. And by African standards. He's got an aunt living here illegally in the United States. She's on welfare as well. And he said that basically Americans are too clingy to guns and religion. That's the small town American people that don't realize they need to give up their guns and give up evidently their religion. So this is a very interesting guy to have as president. Now there's some passages in the Bible that talk about Babylon and the end days Babylon and how God is against it. And there's a passage in Jeremiah. It's interesting, Jeremiah, right? Jeremiah 50, chapters 51 and 50. And there's a passage there that we're going to have to look at and examine whether or not it fits with this character or not. Because of course at the same time this is going on, the United States is working to divide up the nation of Israel and is winning friends all over the Middle East. So we are getting to be buddies with all of the enemies of the Jews, and we're dividing Israel and Jerusalem up, and God is uniting the world, letting the world really unite in this antichrist fashion, which goes right up to Jeremiah 50 and 51, and the Bible talks about that country being destroyed, that country going through a civil war, and all the Jews having to leave that country. So we're going to have to look into that. So anyhow, A lot of things we're going to have to look at and discuss as far as prophecy, and so the Bible believer can be aware of what's going on. And of course, as the worse things get, that just means we're getting closer and closer to the Lord's return and the time when He's going to rule and reign forever and ever. So we can be hopeful even as things are going downhill.